Welcome back. This is Steve McGrath, and you are listening to Beyond the Helmet, or maybe you're watching if you're on YouTube. But today, I am pleased to bring you a very interesting guy, someone that played 8 years in the NFL, but that by no means defines who he is or what he's done, because in the few years since then, he's been a pretty busy dude. Give it up for Joe Hawley. Joe, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Steve. Thanks for having me, man. And yeah, it's been one hell of a journey for sure, and I feel like it's just getting started.
It is just getting started. I mean, it's crazy though how there are guys who have been in your shoes who are like, it's done, right? The end of that NFL career is like, oh, it's over. I don't know what to do now. And maybe to some extent you had felt that way, but obviously you're now in a place that you see that the door is wide open. You can do whatever you want, to sort of set the stage for the things you've been into now. Do you mind talking about just generally the last, maybe it's few years of your NFL career? When did you start? Because you had battled through some injuries. When did you start thinking about, hey, I'm going to have to do something after this, and I don't know how much longer I can do this?
Yeah. Yeah, I had definitely a very up and down NFL career. Lost my starting job 5 different times. I was one of those guys that constantly had to grind and show up and prove myself. And that became very tiring. So that was an aspect of it. Obviously, I blew my knee out my 5th year. And so it was a really major injury, tore my ACL, MCL. It was an 11-month recovery. My knee and body never really were the same after that. So the physical toll the game takes on your body, that was definitely in my awareness pretty quickly. And it was really, I really started contemplating, my retirement and walking away from the game when I finally, made enough money to be really financially secure. And, I was confronted with this question of, do I keep playing this game with all of these kind of things that I'm sacrificing in order to make, a few more $1 million? And I probably could have played a couple more years and made a lot more money. But I was very aware in confronting that question of, is this worth it? And I think, a lot of athletes eventually get to that point. And a lot of guys, it's really challenging. And there's a lot of unique challenges, like you talked about, from walking away from such a pinnacle experience like playing professional sports. And it's, why I'm so involved in the work I'm doing now is because it's such a fall from grace, and there's so many unique challenges that you can't really prepare for when you're done playing. It is an ego death. It's an identity shift. And I was someone that was so aware that football was something I did. It was not who I was. And a part of me always wanted to be known in the world for something more than football, because, if I was in conversation with somebody and I say, hey, I played in the NFL for 8 years, more times than not, their whole demeanor changes. Their whole story of who they think I am changes. And it's like they know me and then they start talking football. And it's like, I want to be known for something more than that. And so I had this awareness. And when I finally walked away from the game, even though I was walking away on my own terms, and, it was really, there was a aspect of me that knew I was going to miss the game, but there was a part of me that was really excited about the next adventure and experiencing the freedom from this thing that I'd spent my entire life pursuing greatness at. I was hit like a ton of bricks with this reality and finality of, holy crap, that was a lot bigger part of who I was than I really gave credit for. And of course it was. I played 16 years. It was my childhood dream. I had been singularly focused on this one thing my entire life. And so for that thing to be all of a sudden in the rearview mirror, it does confront you with, these kind of existential questions of, who am I in relation to the world without this thing that had defined me for so long? And that's kind of what led me on this journey over the last couple of years of really, self-discovery, self-realization, and really trying to figure out and answer those deeper questions of, who am I?
Well, it's definitely been made clear in your work since then that you are a deeper guy. So I hope you don't mind. I have some deeper level questions for you because, if anyone listens to, and we'll get into the podcast, but you clearly like to think about things. When you think about that career, how much has that changed from the time you said it's over to now? Like, how did your feelings about who you were, what you have accomplished, at the time you walked away till now? I mean, to some extent, I'd imagine that it sort of changed your view on just being an athlete, what it's meant to you, and what you can do in your life.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of layers to that. I think one of them is, when I was in the NFL, there was always this aspect of me. And I think I had this inner dichotomy, right? There was a part of me that uh, felt like I was the best player on the field. I had this confidence that nobody could beat me. But then there's this other side of me that felt like I was an imposter, felt like I didn't belong, felt like I had to continue to prove myself. And I think it's really important to have both sides and have balance within them, because if you don't have the confidence to step on the field with the best in the world, you're going to get exposed and you're not going to feel like you belong. But if you stay in that space without working hard, then you're going to get exposed as well. And so also having that side of me that needed to continue to show up and prove myself and work hard and know that I'm not the best I can be, and finding balance within that. And um, so when I was in playing the NFL, like I talked about, my career was very up and down. I lost my starting job 5 different times. Once because of injury, once because they drafted a guy in the first round. One time I just lost the job because of my performance, like all of these things. And so I constantly had to continue to prove myself, and never really felt like I belonged or I had made it to where I wanted. I never felt like I was a huge part of the team. And I think a lot of guys on this deeper inner story feel that way, because, you hear about the guys on ESPN, the top 5% of the league, and they're like making all the money and their job's not really on the line. They like kind of can be more comfortable. Like that's like 5 or 6 guys on each team. The rest of the guys are trying to continue to grind. And so I always had this feeling of, man, I just don't feel like I'm really belong here. I feel like this imposter. And it wasn't until I was done playing when I was able to look back on my career and what I've accomplished, and I've really like had a real great sense of pride in what I have accomplished. And looking back on my career, wow, I really made it. The odds of making the NFL are like less than 1%. And like all these stories that I had to overcome, and all these doubts and limiting beliefs and stories of other people of how hard it is. And not only did I make it to the NFL, and not only did I lose my starting job 5 times and came back and earned it back, I played for 8 years, which is the average career is 3 years. So just looking back all these things, like, whoa, like I'm so proud of myself. And a cool story, actually, when I was in the NFL, I was playing for the Bucks. I think it was like my 6th or 7th year. And I remember, just practice, I was just blocking, and Jameis Winston, who's the quarterback at the time, threw a deep ball in practice to Mike Evans, and he made this one-handed catch, and it was just like this Sports Center top 10, like best play of the year. And I just remember looking, and I looked at everybody. I was like, did anybody else see that? Oh my goodness. And it was like, everybody was kind of like business as usual. And it was a real present moment of me realizing like, whoa, of course, like these are the best athletes in the world. And then I reflected like, oh my gosh, I am one of those athletes. Like I'm playing with the best in the world. And it's one of those things that when you're in it, it's hard to really understand, because you're really competing with the best of the world. And so like these little micro differences are kind of magnified when you're in it. But now that I've, had some time to reflect and look back at my journey as a whole, like I was one of the best in the world at something. And it's not until right now that I really have a deep appreciation for that. And I do have a nostalgia for being that good at something. And, the journey now, and I think this is one of the unique challenges that athletes face, is this humility to kind of start fresh and go on a new journey and reach greatness in something else. But it does take a sense of humility to go on that journey. And yeah, I miss being that good at something, but the cool thing is I have opportunity to be that good at something else.
So this is as good a time as any to segue into the Hart Collective. So while I want to get to this, near 2-year road trip, for you to have this perspective that you do, how much of what you do with the Hart Collective, and, an easy way for people to kind of get cued into that, if you're not a former athlete, is to listen to your podcast, Life Beyond the Game, where you speak to guys that are transitioning out. I mean, I had a chance to listen to just the Joe Thomas one before I came on, and it's a great conversation. You obviously, it's not just someone like me asking questions, but someone who's, walked that walk like you have. It's a real interesting, if people care at all, to see how guys deal with that, particularly someone like Joe, who is just top of the top for such a long time. Can you just speak a little bit about how, you've got into starting the Hart Collective, and is what you're doing? Of course it's a sense of purpose, but like, do you get like a sense of healing out of it as well, to sort of stay clued in and, to the league? And, did you get spiritually something out of it that almost sort of helps you work through maybe anything that you have as being a former athlete?
Yeah. 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 Thank you. I think there's this shared common thread of every athlete, pro athlete, athlete in general, because every athlete at some point has to transition out of the identity of being an athlete into, the normal way of being. But it's almost really, under such an intense microscope, leaving the professional level, and there's a lot of unique challenges. And so what I've found, when I first walked away, and I was somebody that was walking away on my own terms, I was really looking forward to it. Most people, 90% of the guys, their careers are over before they want it to be, for a wide variety of reasons. They blow out their knees, they get cut, they just never really make it to the next level, all these different things. So for me to be so aware and excited about the next adventure, and for me to like really faced with all these really identity crisis and these challenges, realizing, wow, this is a lot tougher than I anticipated, and the unique challenges, there's a long list of them, but, one of them that I was surprised was, my identity was lost in football, but also the people that were closest to me, like my family and friends, their identity of who I was a football player. And so for me to navigate life and in relation to them as well, without knowing who I was without football, how could I expect them to know? And so there's this whole journey that needs to take place of kind of rebuilding that story of who you are without the identity of being a football player, but learning to integrate that into who you are and all the lessons that you've learned as an athlete, because I would definitely not be the man I am today if it wasn't for football and all that it has taught me. So for me on my journey, when I first walked away, I didn't know who I was going through this huge transition. I was going through a huge breakup at the time and just all this big movement in my life. And so what I did is I bought a van, rescued a dog. I traveled the country for the better part of 2 years, a little bit of the journey you were talking about. And that journey was, this self-discovery of trying to figure out who I was, what the world was, what I wanted to do, what's the deeper meaning, what's the purpose, is definitely the spiritual journey. And towards the end of that journey, I started asking myself, okay, like, well, what's my purpose? What am I here to do? How can I be of service? And that's when I got the idea of how impactful it would have been if there was a community that provided a support and a container for other guys that know what the experience is like. Because as an athlete transitioning out of sports, it's really hard for somebody to hold space for what that experience is if they haven't experienced it. And that's with anything really. Like if you're a parent who has lost a child, I won't be able to like really console you and hold space for you because you know that I haven't gone through that experience. But if I have gone through that experience, I can empathize with you. I can have compassion. I can hold space. And it's a very similar thing where even if I'm, not struggling or having a hard time, it's just hard to really feel seen and heard by somebody that, understands the experience on an experiential level. And so that's where the idea of the impact and power we could have if we created a community for male former professional athletes to come together and support one another in reaching higher levels of awareness and success and greatness after the game is over, because we are truly just getting started, and athletes are really special individuals. To make it to the pinnacle, to the NFL, it's the odds are so minimal, and it's because of all of the ability, the mental toughness, the discipline, the ability to overcome doubt and limiting beliefs and handle failures. All of these things are really these intangibles that are really special about the individual. And when the game is over, a lot of guys are untethered. They don't know what to do with all that energy, where to focus it. And so the intention behind the Hart Collective is to really provide a space for us to grow and learn from one another through our experience so that we can continue to make a positive impact in the world with the amazing energy and gifts that we have as individuals.
Absolutely. I mean, I try to do my fair share with my little show here, but I've felt that way all along. And I mean, this sounds so stupid, and I don't even want to compare it in any way to yours, but like even not playing football after high school was really tough for me because it was just something that I had loved so much. And then when it was gone, it was like, for literally all through college, like it felt weird in the fall to like not be playing, let alone the summer getting like, it's just, so if that could hurt me at such a small level, I could only imagine when you add in the money, the fame, everything else, how incredibly challenging it would be. So I mean, that's why I truly do appreciate the Hart Collective. And I'm sure since it is so young, because you've only been out of the game for such a small amount of time, that there's only going to be big things coming as you continue to grow that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I really have a big vision for it. And it feels, definitely bigger than me. When I had this idea to create this thing, it was the first thing that came to me was fear, was resistance, was I don't want to do this. I've had my own resistance throughout my entire career of stepping up as a leader, and, how will people receive it? And am I, even on the entrepreneurial journey, like, do I have the ability to create a business out of nothing? All of these fears, limiting beliefs, but I just continued to show up because this insight and this vision, it feels almost bigger than me. And I'm just kind of the vessel that it wants to be created through, and I'm the man for the job. And so I've had to work through my own internal resistance to create this thing. And when we launched in November 2020, we've created a community online. We do weekly calls, and the community is continuing to grow. And we just hosted our first retreat 2 weeks ago, and it was so transformational and healing and really powerful for these guys. And even for me, like, being surrounded by other athletes and being able to talk ball again, but in a more open, honest, and vulnerable way, it was incredible. And so I'm just so, reinvigorated and inspired to continue to create these experiential retreats for guys to connect on a deeper level with guys that can really hold space for that experience.
That's awesome. No, I have to ask though, did any part of that inner resistance, does that feed into being like an offensive lineman? Because you never want to be the guy that has any attention put on you. Like part of this sort of, scaffolding of who you are that you built as being an athlete, to take it down to a positional level, do you feel like part of that, process of you being who you are today, a little bit is overcoming playing a position where you just never wanted the focus to be on you, where maybe you were vocal internally with the team, but certainly you don't want the coaches talking about you. You certainly don't want the media talking about you. I mean, is there any part of what I just said that rings true?
Yeah, I think, as an offensive lineman, I think I have a natural humility that comes with the position because,
Sure.
everybody else is kind of like the old saying, like we pave the way and the glory follows, right? But it's funny because my entire career, I wanted to be the superstar. I wanted to be the guy with the ball in my hands. I wanted to be the playmaker. And, the universe blessed me with the ability to play offensive line. And so it was this kind of weird experience of wanting to make a difference in the game and make the big play and be seen for, that ability. And I never really had that. So, but it actually created my play on the field. And the way I could show up and make a difference is, work my ass off to go downfield and make the block to spring the receiver for a touchdown. And that's how I could get seen and heard. And so I don't think I was ever someone that's like, I don't want to be seen and heard. Like I really had that desire, but it actually showed up in my play as an offensive lineman to continue to play the hardest and make the plays to spring the guy for the touchdown. But yeah, I always wonder what it'd be like if I was like a tight end or running back. I played an all-star game one time when I was in high school, and I got voted as an offensive lineman most likely to want to be a skill position.
I mean, did you have the hands though? Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna play
No,
skill, you
so
got to have the hands.
actually, my I forget what it was my third or fourth year. I was playing fullback. They had a package, like a jumbo package, where I was playing fullback because our fullback had been hurt for a couple of weeks, and it was against the Washington Redskins, and I actually had two passes thrown at me, and I dropped both of them. So, no is the answer to that.
Oh man. I gotta point out that I'm pretty sure Dirk Cutter was on the record of saying that you were a little bit of an agitator. So when you were playing that sort of style, I mean, it's um, maybe sometimes the team needs it. Maybe that's just personally who you are. But I mean, did you, if that's true, did you find that has carried over into life outside of being an athlete?
Yeah, it's fascinating. It kind of goes back to the story I just told of wanting to make a difference in any way that I could. And it's really hard to make that impact as an offensive lineman, at least an impact that is seen. And, it's kind of this internal journey I've been on. Like it used to come out in a very unhealthy way. Like I played at UNLV and I was really frustrated because we never had a winning record. And I hated losing so much that as an offensive lineman, I couldn't really impact the game except for blocking the person in front of me. So what I learned to do is like try and block them as hard as I can. And what that led to is maybe over blocking them. A little bit of frustration would come out and I would get some personal fouls. And so early in my career, it came out in an unhealthy way because I wanted to win so bad. I wanted to make a difference, but that's all I felt like I could do. And, as my journey continued, I had a couple of those moments when I was, younger in my career. And in the NFL, different than college, is they actually fine you for getting personal fouls and it costs you money. And so I learned very quickly to channel that in a healthy way and realizing that as a defense is going after the ball, it's my job to make sure that guy doesn't touch the ball carrier. And if you watch a game, you'll notice like, when a running back gets tackled, it's like he gets tackled and then like two or three extra guys kind of like pile on top of him. And so I took a lot of pride in making sure that my guy was never adding extra weight and hits on the running back. And so what that means is I would do my best to like stay in between my guy and the ball carrier. And if the ball was downfield, I would run my ass off to try and, protect the receiver from anybody coming in late. And really, that was the way I could really show up and make a difference in the game. And I learned very quickly that when you do that kind of things as an offensive lineman, it's very rare, and defenses don't usually face that because a lot of offensive linemen are big, they do their job, and they kind of waddle downfield. I wasn't like that. And so I would be kind of a pest, right? I would always be trying to get under the defensive lineman's skin. And as an athlete, knowing that the more I could do that and I would kind of trigger them into these kind of like fight or flight anger mode, it would affect their play on the field. And, you got to understand which guys you're doing that to, because sometimes if you poke the wrong bear, it can make for a very long day as an offensive lineman in third downs and pass rush. but yeah, I just tried to give it my all. And, you know, I think if you look back on my entire career from high school to my last game playing, if you turn on any single play, I'm giving absolutely 110%. And I take a lot of pride in that.
Yeah, I mean that's the type of thing you can always hang your hat on. But you know, I have to ask, you know, now as a guy that you know is doing everything that you're doing, you know, is this? Did you always? And you said that you kind of wanted a little bit of, you had that like rock star type of vibe to you that you always wanted a little bit of the spotlight. But do you feel like maybe more so that the spirituality part of you, like were these things kind of stymied being a pro athlete, or was this something that going through this like nearly 2 year, you know, trip across the country that you kind of had this awakening that this is who you are and you really wanted to explore this? Like, is it more of a new found thing for you, or is this something that you just never really had an outlet for, so you kind of had to bottle it up?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different dimensions to it, but I would say, you know, the short answer is yeah, it's kind of this new self-discovery and this new unfolding. I've done a lot of my own deep healing work and understanding the deeper stories and physical traumas and emotional traumas and experiences growing up, and healing my connection with my parents, and like all these things that play a role. You know, as I was playing football, you know, it was a slow journey of continuing to awaken to these different concepts. um, I think, you know, my fourth or fifth years when I first started meditating, we had a mindset coach come, and I had a lot of resistance to the idea of meditation because I grew up in a Christian household and I was told it's like Eastern mysticism and it's evil and it's the way Satan makes its way into your mind and all these stories. And so, like, as a spiritual concept, I had a lot of resistance to it. But then these guys came in and talked about how it could be it's a tool for training the mind. And, you know, if you go into the gym and you work out, and the resistance that you have is how you build muscle. And so you can do the same thing by training the mind, by sitting in silence and coming back to presence. And so that was kind of the journey of that kind of practice of really understanding that the mind is its own thing, and that I am not my thoughts, and creating that observer of the experience. And that was really challenging. That took a couple of years to really kind of, it's still challenging, but that's understanding that that's the whole point. So that kind of, you know, self-discovery started happening. And I started reading books. I think when I first started reading, I was like 24, 25, about halfway through my career. And it was because Tony Gonzalez, who I played with, he did his final game. He gave up, he stood up in front of the team the night before his last game, and he gave a little speech. And he like never really talked in front of the team. He was just definitely a lead by example kind of guy. But obviously this Hall of Famer, 17-year career, he's standing there, and I look up to him. A lot of people do. And I'm just like taking every word that he says. And there was one thing that really stood out from what he said. And he like shared three things that have had a huge impact on his life and his success. And one of, I forget what the other two are, but one of them was he read. He's like the power of reading and learning from other people's experience. And I really took that to heart. And so I remember messaging him that off season. I was like, hey, like, what are some books that I can, you know, start reading to start doing this journey and learning? And so I started reading, and it's a process. But, you know, since then, probably 6 or 7 years ago, I mean, I've read a few hundred books, just like consuming so much. And, you know, reading has completely shifted my perspective, changed my life, and has definitely helped me down this path. And obviously, as the journey unfolds, there's a lot of different things that have deepened my experience.
Well, if you're going to say that, you know, I have to follow up with like, can you give me a couple of books? Or what are some of the, you know, it's tough to put you on the spot when you've read that many, but I mean, are there any in particular that you're like, you know, for someone that hasn't done a lot of reading, like here's a good starting place?
Yeah, I think the first book that I read that Tony recommended me was a book called The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. And it's about a trial lawyer who has a heart attack um, in court, and he's basically faced with this decision. The doctor's like, you can either continue practicing law and kill yourself, or you can give up your law practice and go find out this deeper meaning of life. And it's fascinating looking back on when I read that. I was like my fourth or fifth year in my career, and kind of how my life's unfolded very similar to that path of that man on the spiritual journey of what are we really trying to get to? What is achievement? What is success? And how do we find deeper fulfillment? And so the man goes on this kind of spiritual quest to find these monks that live in the Himalayan mountains, and he ends up finding them, and it's like this mystical experience. But then he ends up coming back to his old life like a couple years later, and his whole body's changed, his eyes are glowing, and he's just really found himself. And so that really inspired me to, it's a really easy read, and it talks about different kind of self-development practices to kind of find more presence in your own life and the tools to kind of navigate. And so it's just a really accessible, easy foundational book that really kind of started me on the journey. And then there's a ton of books out there that can really change your life, but that's a really good one to start.
Now, as we get toward the end here, I just want to talk a little bit about some of the other things you've had your hand in, because there's the Hart Collective, there's the podcast we've talked about that's sort of housed underneath there, but you also have Quantum Coffee, which explores more of. I feel like spirituality has been the word of the day, so I hate to keep using it, but I mean just sort of like a mental, physical well-being and not getting caught so much in like the rat race. I think is a very broad way to sort of sum up what that is. And please correct me if there's a better.
Well, the intention behind it is curiosity, right?
Curiosity.
Is as you go on this path, the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. And so it's being in a place of curiosity and questioning our stories and coming to a place of knowing that we don't know. And the intention is to help guide people through the conversations I'm having, to question their own stories and to work through them by questioning and knowing we don't know.
And then there's also Love and Life. A few episodes of you and your wife sort of opening up a little bit about that personal journey. And then on top of that, you documented and shared a lot of your road trip. And how is Freedom, by the way?
Yeah, Freedom is fantastic. She's we were on the road for a couple of years together, and now we're kind of grounded. I started a family, got a new kid, so she's a domesticated dog now. So she's loving the home life. But yeah, I mean, Love and Life is a cool podcast. It's really unique. It's kind of this storytelling with some sound effects and music in the background. It's just me and my wife. We met literally the day that quarantine and the lockdown started, middle of March last year. Quarantined together, went on our first date, and now we are married and have a kid. And so it kind of chronicles that journey in a really beautiful way. So yeah, definitely check that out.
Quarantine would either make a relationship or break one, and certainly yours fell one way for the better.
No doubt, no doubt. Yeah, and if you want to see videos of my trip when I was traveling, I did probably 20 plus YouTube videos that are still up on my channel. So if you YouTube and search my name, you'll be able to find all these really cool videos of my experience on the road.
And what I'm building towards as we lay those out there is just, how do you think about juggling the different things that you have your hands on, and then really deciding what you want to put your time and energy into? The Hart Collective feels obvious. Quantum Coffee feels like a very obvious extension of who you are too. That and even Love and Life, like they all seem very much true to who you are in the little that I know you. But I mean, how do you decide what you want to do in making sure that there's a good balance among that and just your everything else you enjoy doing?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I have a lot going on. Some days I feel a bit overwhelmed, and what I do is when I'm working on a project, and I have the same experience when I was doing the YouTube videos with the Man Van Dog blog, and I was traveling, and same thing with the Love and Life. I've had a conversation with my wife. It's like, what's the intention of me building this? Like, what do I want to get out of this? What's the bigger vision? And if it's something that I'm not super aligned with, or it's going to take a lot of energy input with not a lot of energy output, then I will, table it. And so like the Love and Life, we were going to continue because it came out in the first season, and we were going to continue to do seasons and kind of do this reality show experience, in a conversation with my wife, like we have so much going on. She's an entrepreneur. She's starting this tech platform. And, it's like, do we want to put a ton of energy into this, or should we use this energy on something else? It was the same thing when I was traveling and doing the YouTube videos. Like I felt this pressure of having to show up because I started getting a little bit of a following and people were like really loving my videos. And so I felt like I was starting to become a slave to creating these videos. And I kind of took a step back and questions like, what's my intention here? Do I want to be a YouTube influencer? Because if that's the case, I'm going to continue putting energy into this and growing my audience. But as I reflected on that, I was like, I don't really want to be a YouTube influencer. So I have to let this go because it's not serving my bigger purpose. And so when I thought about that, I was like, what do I really want to do in life? I want to create something of impact. I want to really have help shift people's stories and do this deeper healing. And so through the Hart Collective, I can really show up and build that thing. And then if, influence comes from building that thing that is special, then that's, the easier path, because I know that I'm putting my energy into something that I care about.
Very cool. Well, Joe, I know that we're going to kind of get up against it here. So I just want to quickly run through the gauntlet with you. Just have a few quick hitter questions, man. What's most important, having the number one offense or number one defense?
Oh man. I'm biased. I would say number one offense.
Fair enough. Played on a couple good ones.
Yeah.
Pre-game ritual. Was there anything you had to do before a game?
Oh, I mean, I liked going out before the game and being in kind of the empty stadium and feeling the energy of it, like the tension before game time, and just sitting on the bench and just taking it all in. It's probably one of the best things is being grateful to have an experience to be on the field playing the game when it was something I looked forward to and dreamed about for so long, and just that never really got old.
Awesome. Now, was there any coach or a team or a player, anyone that you just wish you had a chance to have played with or for?
Oh man. Yeah, I think it would have been really cool to be the center for Brett Favre. It's someone I really looked up to, and I think it would be really cool to have played with him, just because he played the game like a kid with that innocent energy of just having fun, which I think really gets lost in the business of football at times. And I think it would have been really fun to have that long career with one quarterback, one of the greats. That would have been absolutely epic.
What's most important? Is it the players or is it the scheme?
Oh man. I mean, I would say it's the players, but the scheme and coaching does have a huge role, especially in the NFL, bigger than most people realize. So yeah, a little bit of both and.
Last one, and I think it's most important, given everything we've talked about. What's the one best piece of advice that you'd like to leave us on?
Yeah, I would say if you really want to make the most of your life and continue to live most fully, is to get outside your comfort zone as much as you can, and whatever that looks like. If something, and it's different for everybody, right? My comfort zone is different than your comfort zone, but if you continue to get outside your comfort zone in an intentional way, that's the only place that real growth can happen. And a lot of people, they want to create certainty and comfort, and that will begin to suffocate you from the inside out, I promise. And so continue to seek out new adventure, seek out new experience, get outside your comfort zone, overcome your fears, and life will be a lot more enjoyable. It's not going to be as easy. It's going to be challenging. It takes a lot of courage, but it will change your life.
Well, I hope you've inspired a couple of people out there to have the courage to get out there. I'm very thankful that you took the time today, man. So to wrap it up, it is the Hart Collective, joe-hawley.com. Podcast for Life Beyond the Game, Quantum Coffee, Love and Life. Is there anything else that I missed there? A couple balls up in the air.
Yeah, Instagram's joe.hawley, and then there's a link tree in there that has access to all my stuff. And yeah, man, I'd really love to hear from your audience, what they thought of the podcast, and definitely reach out to me if you feel called. And I really appreciate the time, brother.
Man, thank you so much.